Hey everyone, so in today's set of videos we're going to be talking about what a salt is and how we can identify salts using the chemical formula or perhaps the chemical name. So we're going to be talking about what are salts. A salt is generally made when a base, or you can say for that matter an alkali, neutralizes an acid. So we have got two things. We have got an alkali neutralized by an acid and vice versa. Normally the alkalis or the bases provide the positive ion, or you can say the cation, and obviously the acids supply the anion required for the formation of the salt. So the cation comes from the base and the anion comes from the alkali. Cation, anion. And when they combine, you get finally a salt, which can be a combination of two differently charged ions, and obviously it's an ionic compound. Coming back, when we look at the formula, generally a formula has two parts. When we talk about ionic compounds, at least a formula has two parts. It has the positive part and it has the negative part. And when we read the name, when we hear the name, when we read the chemical formula, we get to know which side is the positive and which side is the negative one. So obviously all the time we have a cation, which is the plus charge, written with the anion, which is the minus charge. Now the formula generally is written like this, that the cation is written first and then the anion, whether it's the chemical formula or the name. So generally we have oxides, we have hydroxides, we have carbonates for that matter, so I'm going to put them a little closer. We have carbonates, and then we have salts, which can include chlorides, nitrates, or sulfates. We'll talk about them. So when we talk about metallic oxides or hydroxides or carbonates, they are all basic in nature. They're all basic in nature. I'll write this on the top part like this. They're all basic in nature. They are not salts essentially. They are basic ionic compounds. For example, I'm taking 5 metals for example: potassium, sodium, magnesium, let's suppose iron, copper. So for example, potassium oxide is K2O, sodium oxide is Na2O, magnesium oxide, iron 2 oxide, because iron has a possibility of making +2 and +3 pole charges, copper oxide. They're all basic in nature. Similarly, they can form hydroxides as well. So the hydroxides are going to be like potassium hydroxide, sodium hydroxide, magnesium hydroxide, iron hydroxide, and then for example copper hydroxide. Carbonates are going to be another category. So for example, potassium carbonate, sodium carbonate with a similar chemical formula, for example magnesium carbonate, iron carbonate, and then obviously copper carbonate. These are all basic characters. These are all basic species. So they are not salt. A salt is only if a metal is with essentially chlorides, nitrates, or sulfates. At least for the O-level chemistry, this is general idea that we talk about, that chlorides, sulfates, and nitrates, when they come with metals, they make salts. So when we talk about salts, they have generally chlorides, they have nitrates, and they have sulfates. Let's move it a little over here so that we have enough space for the other definitions to hop in. For example, I'm using the same metals. I'm talking about potassium, then sodium, magnesium, let's suppose iron, and then let's suppose copper. So they're gonna be like potassium chloride, sodium chloride, magnesium chloride, for example iron chloride, and let's suppose copper chloride. These are salts. These are not basic anymore. They are salt. All the other ones, the oxides, the hydroxides, the carbonates, they were obviously basic substances. They were not neutral substances. They could react with acids and they could perform the neutralization reaction. But a salt is already a product. It does not gonna react with another acid. So salts are generally neutral. They are generally neutral, which means they might not be, but for the time being, we're gonna call all the salts neutral. Similarly, for example, nitrate. So it's gonna be potassium nitrate, KNO3. It's gonna be sodium nitrate. It can be magnesium nitrate. It can be iron nitrate. These are all salts. Now it's an iron salt. Copper salt is going to be copper nitrate. Similarly, for sulfate, it's going to be potassium sulfate. Sulfate has a charge of -2. So that is why we have this formula. Sodium sulfate, a similar chemical formula, sodium sulfate. It could be magnesium sulfate with MgSO4. We can have iron sulfate, which is FeSO4. We have copper sulfate, which is CuSO4. So all of these are salts. If it's a nitrate with a metal, if it's a chloride with a metal, if it's a sulfate with a metal, obviously these are all gonna be salts. Now when we talk about the idea of salts, we should know two things. They are neutral compounds for the time being. Let's say they're neutral compounds. They can be acidic or basic, but right now largely we're talking about the neutral salts. So they have metal combined with a non-metallic ion, which could be a chloride, which could be a nitrate, which could be a sulfate. Metal oxides, they are basic. Metal hydroxides are also basic, and metal carbonates are again basic. So hydroxides, oxides, carbonates, they are not salt. They are basic ionic compounds that we are not going to talk about right now. We're going to talk about metal chlorides, metal nitrates, and metal sulfates. We're going to catch up in the next video. We're going to talk more about them.